Hello everyone, and welcome to today's in-depth look at the complex geopolitical dealings between Russia, North Korea, South Korea, China, and the United States, all revolving around the war in Ukraine. The brutal conflict in Ukraine has now dragged on for nearly 2 grueling years, with no end in sight. The costs have been catastrophic, with recent casualty estimates indicating around 500,000 soldiers have been killed or wounded so far, including nearly 200,000 dead. This makes the war in Ukraine the deadliest military conflict suffered in Europe since the trauma of World War II. The intensity of combat and volume of casualties speaks to just how much firepower has been utilized by both sides. Ukraine has survived thanks to ample military assistance provided by Western nations, most substantially from the United States, which has allocated over $44 billion in aid to Ukraine since the war began. These weapons have allowed valiant Ukrainian forces to repel the Russian onslaught. However, Russia's position has become increasingly isolated, with most countries refusing requests for direct military support. Facing sanctions and the cutting of supply lines from the West, the Russian war machine is desperation seeking new sources of munitions and weapons to continue its invasion of Ukraine. In perhaps one of history's most ironic twists, Russia has turned to North Korea. Yes, isolated and impoverished North Korea, sometimes more mocked than feared on the world stage in recent decades. Yet we must not underestimate North Korea's military power, which remains formidable despite its antiquated economy. You see, North Korea has accumulated utterly massive stockpiles of artillery shells and ammunition for over 70 years, guarded jealously as a deterrent against potential aggression. With few alternative options, Russia hopes to gain access to North Korea's enormous artillery arsenal, as the munitions are designed to be compatible with Russian artillery systems currently deployed in Ukraine. If Russia could acquire even a fraction of the North's stockpiles, it could significantly prolong Russia's flagging invasion. Of course, North Korea will not provide military aid for free, as the regime seeks resources Russia can offer in return. Most urgently, North Korea requires food, fuel, lifting of sanctions, and normalized economic ties with Russia. In a remarkable development, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un himself visited Russia this September, meeting Putin face-to-face to negotiate the terms of a deal exchanging North Korean munitions for Russian aid. Two key outcast nations appear poised to form a dark alliance supporting aggression in Ukraine, despite risks of becoming further diplomatically and economically isolated. However, if North Korean artillery shells begin appearing on Ukrainian battlefields, it will confirm secret deals have likely already been struck. Now you may wonder, why exactly does North Korea, so distant from Europe, possess such enormous stockpiles of artillery in the first place? We must briefly go over the history. Since the Korean War ended in stalemate in 1953, North Korea has seen itself in perpetual conflict with its southern neighbor and the United States. Expecting renewed war for decades, North Korea transformed itself into history's most militarized society, with over 1/3 of the population in active or reserve military roles. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union provided North Korea with military aid and designs for artillery, which North Korea mass-produced in vast quantities. Even today, over 10,000 artillery systems and millions of shells likely remain entrenched near the border with South Korea. After witnessing the U.S. swiftly demolish Iraq's army in 2003, North Korea feared it too could be targeted for regime change. In 2006, North Korea detonated its first nuclear device, hoping to deter U.S. aggression. North Korea also hoped it could use its nuclear program as leverage for sanctions relief, aid, and normalized ties with the U.S. But after failed talks in 2019, North Korea shifted back into isolated belligerence, now seemingly choosing to arm Russia instead. South Korea, despite recent rapprochement efforts with the North, cannot accept substantial Russian military support flowing into North Korea unanswered. You see, South Korea also possesses tremendous military power, including its own stockpiles of artillery and arms it has steadily built up since 1953. Recently emerging as a major arms exporter, South Korea could respond to North Korean enabling of Russia by boosting its direct transfers of weapons to aid Ukraine. However, this risks provoking greater Russian retaliation. If Russia provided advanced missiles, aircraft, submarines or other technologies to reinforce North Korean capabilities, South Korea may respond by developing its own nuclear weapons at last. Public support for an independent South Korean nuclear deterrent already stands at over 70% in polling, and would only grow more insistent in response to a more dangerous North Korea backed by Russia. The United States could even redeploy tactical nuclear weapons to South Korea, as was seen during the Cold War era. But China would be incredibly alarmed by nuclear proliferation and heightened risk of atomic conflict so close to its borders. Thus, China will likely pressure Russia and North Korea to avoid deals exchanging advanced weapons and military technologies. China prefers North Korea serve as merely an extra source of basic supplies for Russia's struggling invasion of Ukraine. Of course, both North Korea and Russia will aim to keep any material support provided to the invasion strictly confidential. Russia is obligated as a permanent UN Security Council member to uphold sanctions prohibiting military transfers to North Korea. Violating international laws further would only isolate Russia more. North Korea also wants to maintain a veneer of plausible deniability and avoid openly antagonizing South Korea and the United States. But desperation on both sides likely means they are willing to take the risks of secretly arrangements funneling North Korean munitions into Ukraine. The ethical and human costs of Russia's potential looting of North Korean artillery to prolong the war in Ukraine are chilling to contemplate. Two grimly authoritarian regimes may be forming a dark pact to circumvent international law, compounding the suffering of Ukrainians and their defenders. We can only hope wiser diplomacy prevails over military desperation. But the world must watch closely for any clues that North Korean arms have begun illicitly equipping Russia's military as the invasion drags on. The implications would be severe.